We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
With Thanksgiving just around the corner, there's no better time to do a year-by-year comparison on just how well Bidenomics is treating the average family. And with us to provide the numbers, the pork, and perhaps the turkey is Liberty Nation's economics correspondent, Mr. Andrew Moran. Welcome back, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
It has. We're glad to have you back on. We assumed that we wouldn't need you anymore because Joe Biden assured us that the economy was going from strength to strength. But it appears that's not quite true. Is it, Andrew?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, if you look at every single metric, aside from the labor market, of course, it's just everything is on the downhill. The PMIs are contracting, inflation's still elevated. Companies are their forward guidance is dreadful. The stock market is still in a bear market. So yeah, I mean, every single component of the U.S. economy isn't that great right now, and recession is almost guaranteed at this point. A second one, anyway.
So yeah, of course, they could deny the second one as easily as they denied the first one. So let's talk turkey, quite literally, Andrew. Let's talk turkey. Thanksgiving dinner is coming up. And I know for many of our listeners who don't opt for the tofurkey version, this could be quite an expensive time of year. What are the details?
Yeah, so the price of the centerpiece itself, turkey. I mean, it's at an all-time high right now. And you look at the numbers, I think it's up 21% from a year ago. The cost of a 16-pound bird is $28.96, or if you do the math, and I'm terrible at math, it's $1.81 per pound.
Says the Economist.
And the overall Thanksgiving feast, according to the American Farm Bureau, is up 20% from a year ago. So overall, I mean, this Thanksgiving is going to be absolutely expensive for anyone. If you look at some of the surveys, they show a quarter of Americans are just giving up Thanksgiving. They're not going to do anything this year because of how expensive it is. And it's not just a turkey. I mean, look at everything around. Look at the price of eggs as a good example of that. Up 40% year over year just a month ago. That was incredible. The price of bread's up 15% from a year ago. Corn, peas, carrots, ham, everything is just up across the board at Thanksgiving feast. And then if you want to go see your in-laws, you're spending, 20% more in gasoline from a year ago. So
I mean, that is the best excuse ever, right? Sorry, in-laws. Exactly. We shan't be there this year. Gas is far too pricey. Now, let's not lay all the blame at the feet of the present economy. There is surely the bird flu that's sweeping the world has impacted the price of the bird anyway, specifically, hasn't it?
Yeah, the bird flu. I mean, it's amazing. Usually, the bird flu is around for the colder months, January, February, March. But this year, the farmers have been noticing that the bird flu actually seeped in July, and July is a critical period for these farmers because that's when they start raising the flock for the Thanksgiving sales. So yeah, the bird flu. It's not just happening in the United States; it's happening in Canada, the UK, Asia, all these different places, and that's adding fuel to this whole turkey inflation. But it's also, again, it's not just bird flu. You have soaring diesel prices, soaring labor costs, and labor shortages, the war in Ukraine, droughts. So I think it was NPR that said it sounds like biblical revelations considering what's happening in the turkey market.
Yeah, I tended to ignore NPR in recent years after they start using far too many adjectives to describe political leaders on the right, and I think that's conduct unbecoming, considering they take taxpayer dollars. Now let's discuss something a little bit different here, but still on the same topic. So, if inflation goes up or down in the near future, is the consumer, are we going to be stuck with these high prices? And as in, once the market learns that a certain percentage of people is or are still willing to pay the higher prices, what incentives do producers have to drop back, do you think?
Well, first of all, I mean, when it comes to inflation, it's sticky. I mean, if you look at the year-over-year growth of 7.7%, that's the baseline from a year ago. But it doesn't mean that prices are going to start falling. If something goes up 7% or 8%, it's going to stay there for a while. It's not going to come down to where it was, pre-pandemic or 1980. And then if you add on top of that, your purchasing power has been completely eviscerated with all the money printing that's been going on. When it comes to producers scaling back their output, if prices are as high as they are, they're going to to continue to try to take advantage of those higher prices. But the problem is that if they try to take advantage of higher prices, they have to do with all these other overhead costs. Labor is one of the biggest things right now occurring. Energy for farmers, fertilizer is trading at all-time highs or near all-time highs now. Anyway, diesel is at $5.40 a gallon. National average, of course, probably higher in a lot of other places. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place where they want to profit off of these near all-time high prices, but then investing it to do that is a risky gamble, because what happens suddenly if prices collapse? Then they have all this investments going down the tubes. That's one of the issues with the oil market today. One of the reasons, not the only one, but one of them, is that oil producers, they're terrified of investing more in case the WTI prices collapse before it be below $80, $70, or $60 a barrel, which makes it, because it makes it harder to break even. And then, of course, in addition to that, you have the regulatory uncertainty from the current Biden administration.
I may be wrong here, Andrew, and my understanding of economics and global power systems is not complete, but it seems that when Joe Biden says that these oil producers and these manufacturing companies that are charging the higher prices, it's not, as he says, that it's all because of greed. There's a certain amount of self-protection involved there, right?
Oh God, it's so frustrating when because it's not just this is the doctrine of the left, or progressivism itself. They think that one, that profit is bad, two, profit is driving higher prices. But that's not the case when it comes to crude oil. And now that we've transitioned to that subject, when we're talking about crude oil, it's the petroleum financial markets that drive the cost of WTI, Brent, natural gas, whatever the case. It's not so much Chevron, posting record profits in its previous quarter, and that's what's completely frustrating. I mean, it sounds on the surface that perhaps he's right, but if you understand economics and how the financial markets work, you see he's just completely lying about it, or perhaps he's not lying; he's just oblivious and ignorant to what's occurring in the broader economic conditions.
I think you'd find a 50-50 split on where that is. I don't think there's anybody saying he's actually right. No, there are some people within the fourth estate saying he's correct. Now, let's stick with Joe Biden for a minute. Now, how is Biden's international largesse? Now, I'm sure you know what I'm referring to here. $20 billion, that's billion with a B, of taxpayer money, much of it from the US, not all of it, to wean Indonesia off coal or off fossil fuels. I mean, firstly, Andrew, how is that impacting long-term economic outlook for the United States? Number two, how can he even justify sending taxpayer money to do climate action in Indonesia? I'm sure the Indonesian people, are wonderful, but really?
Yeah, I first heard of the story actually on LibertyNation.com on the headlines, and I was baffled by it. $20 billion to one country for green energy. What the heck is that? And then you dive deeper into it, and I reported on it for LibertyNation.com. I went into more detail. And yeah, so it's the United States and the G7 partners, and they're giving Indonesia $20 billion to wean off coal and go into green energy, geothermal, solar, all that stuff. But it's so funny because Indonesia, its representation of global emissions is about between 1 and 1.4%. And if you compare that to China, the US represent about half of all international emissions. But this is the latest scheme. I mean, you can fault a poor country like Indonesia or any other nations that are currently negotiating with the G7 and the United Nations and all these Western countries that want to just hand out taxpayer dollars. If you pledge to be a green country, if you're just saying, hey, yeah, of course, we want to get off fossil fuels and have solar panels everywhere, but you give us money, of course you're going to do that. You can't blame them at all for getting $20
billion for a poorer or developing country, as they're called. Of course, they'll take it.
But what's funny too is that Jakarta's goal is to go zero emission economy by 2050. So we got $20 billion now or over the next 5 years for something that might be attained in 2050. So I find that comical. I mean, all these countries are going to do it. And because these Western countries are so desperate to hand out money, the terms and conditions of a lot of these agreements, especially on when it comes to the financing side, they're all going to benefit these countries. They're all going to want, one of the issues that the Indonesian government had was that they wanted far lower interest rates. And guess what? The G7 just gave it to them. So I don't know the specific number, but the president was celebrating that he got lower interest rates.
It's easy to be generous when it's not your money. Andrew Moran.
That's Milton Friedman. That's a Milton Friedman quote. You know, it's an inefficient way to spend other people's money on somebody else. So Milton Friedman was turning in his grave when he read about the Indonesian story.
Well, thank you for talking Turkey with us, Andrew Moran.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be back in just a short moment talking the cryptocurrency collapse that's rocked over 1 million customers with Scott DiCasenza. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.